Super friends, what is up on this SuperFlex Super Friday night? I'm the SuperFlex dude, John Hogue, and man, we there's so much that we could talk about on this SuperFlex Friday night, but as always, to me, the whole reason to do this live is for your input. To be able to touch on the topics that are useful to you, my super friends. Because I can get on here anytime, just kind of by myself. If I have an agenda, I have something I want to talk about, I just hop on the Superflex Super Show, bust out an episode, and throw it in a can. So, but for me, so much of fantasy football is, it's very it's experience based, it's anecdotal. It's so important to to get into the stuff that people are dealing with right now. Get out of the echo chamber, get out of the get off of Twitter. For one thing, I'm always down to get off of Twitter for a minute, take a break there. But it's always so important to get away from the topic of the day, the names of the day. Stop talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown and 25 points per game versus 15 points per game from running backs. I might actually have to talk about that one though. That one was pretty interesting to me. But get away from that stuff that we've just kind of been told is important, and dig into the stuff that's actually important, which is whatever it is that you're doing right now, whatever it is that you're dealing with right now. I know that rookies are kind of on everybody's mind right at the moment. And the problem is, man, we're so far away still from the rookie draft, from the NFL draft. Realistically, it's only a couple months, but there's a lot to do in that amount of time. We're probably going to do startups, probably going to have some Superflex startups in that amount of time. We still have free agency coming. And, the problem with the rookies is we spend so much time talking about them when we have the least amount of information on them. It's actually kind of crazy. It's actually kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of bad process. Doesn't do us a whole lot of good to be talking about, rookie athletic profiles and things of that nature right now, just because that's not what really ends up, telling the majority of the story for those rookies when they do enter the league. Draft capital, massively important. Landing spot is, it kind of depends on the player, depends on the position, but that ends up being also vitally important. And, some of the athletic profile like that, some of that stuff can kind of lead to draft capital, and it can be kind of a tiebreaker when it comes time to take these rookies, and, when it's time to consider which one do we want. But as far as here in, on February 25th, there's not a whole lot that we can actually figure out when it comes to the rookies, just based on what they did in college, what their athletic profile looks like. I'm always happy to talk about rookies. I just think that, man, I just have a feeling that you have more pressing needs right at the moment. I think you've got more important stuff on your mind right at the moment. And my suggestion would be that we talk about those things. But whatever you got, bring them. Ask me anything, man. You know what? Like I always say, ask me anything, and it ends up being just a bunch of football questions. That's totally fine too. I'm happy to. That's why I do this. I'm here for football, but nobody ever takes me up on the actual literal meaning of AMA. I don't get very many questions about other things outside of football. So just a reminder, that's on the table too. But again, you don't have to take advantage of that either. So let's jump in. And like I said, if you've got any questions, drop them here in the live chat, and I get to them every single week. I hit every single one of them every time we do one of these, even if it takes me 2 hours. Sometimes it's taken me 3 hours before, I think. But I mean, that's we got to get to all of them. This is important. We need to get all your questions answered, and do some workshopping on every single one of these, no matter what you've got going on in your leagues right now. We need to talk about it. So we'll get to them. So West Coast Chiefers here, and he says, how's it hanging? It's kind of not right at the moment. It's been like below 0 degrees here in Denver, Colorado for the last basically the entire week. So yeah, it's yeah, the men in the audience know know what I'm talking about there. All right, 12 teams, SuperFlex PPR. I traded Justin Fields for pick 108 and Deontay Johnson. I then traded 108, late 2023 first and 2023 second for Trey Lance. Thoughts? Thanks. Man, you're not going to like my answer. Yeah, you're not going to like my answer, man. I'm sorry to say. What I will say is, I mean, you being on the West Coast, maybe there's some kind of proclivity to Trey Lance. I always say that, to me, there's value in that. I think that that's important. I think, get your guys, like, go all in on your best ideas. And if one of your best ideas is, there's a breakout coming for Trey Lance once he gets his starting job, I think that it's fair to overpay a little bit. You did overpay, though. I will say that, because to me, Fields and Lance is pretty much a lateral move. And it's really hard to imagine a scenario where one breaks out, the other does not, and it's just, it's a huge, there's a huge difference between those two quarterbacks. It's possible, and then if that happens, you win this trade. Obviously, if that were to happen, most likely scenario, just talking about probabilities, the most likely scenario is those two players are going to score pretty similarly, pretty consistently, so, having the difference between Justin Fields and Trey Lance is negligible, to me. But yeah, I mean, so you got Deontay Johnson out of this deal. You end up giving up a 2023 first and a 2023 second. And that's kind of what this amounts to, right? Is a 2023 first, a 2023 second for Deontay Johnson. So actually, when you do the math like that, when you break it down like that, we're basically saying Justin Fields for Trey Lance. The 108 really just kind of gets wiped out of that because it just kind of passed through you. And we're just saying, 2023 first, 2023 second for Deontay Johnson. That's actually not that bad. So, and again, if you prefer, if you have a preference for Trey Lance as opposed to Justin Fields, I think that that's a move that that makes quite a bit of sense. Just to get the roster build that you like, get your guys, So, yeah, it's not as bad as I originally thought. I just saw all that draft capital jumping off your roster, and I was just, basically in order to get from Justin Fields to Trey Lance, and I was just like, man, that's too much. What I will say is, I think we're going to find out that those 2023 firsts are going to be worth quite a bit more. And the other thing I'll say is I don't like playing the game of trying to project it as a late 2023 first, late 2023, early 2023 first, whatever. It I like if you're going to do that, what I would say is buy 2023 firsts as late picks and sell them as early picks. That's kind of the best way for us to maximize, the value that we get out of those picks. So that we're not trying to, we're not trying to run the price up on ourselves when we're trying to buy those picks, but we're also not necessarily, we are maximizing the value that we're getting in return when we sell those picks. So yeah, like that's the way I would go about approaching selling, or trading either way, moving 2023 picks, moving future picks. If you're going to trade it away, sell it as if it's going to be an early one. There's no real way to actually project it right now, but we can certainly. I mean, especially if they gave up Trey Lance and don't have the quarterback depth to replace him, they're going to have a hard time guiding that first round pick to the back half of the first round. So yeah, I would say, I would say, going forward, just treat those, if you're going to trade away a 2023 first, call it an early one and make them pay for it as if it's an early one. And then, like I said, if you're going to buy them though, buy them as if they're late. So, but yeah, honestly, I don't think that that's horrible. If that does end up being a late 2023 first, a first and a second for Deontay Johnson, I think is probably going to end up being fair. Like, not necessarily like you won the trade, but I think it's going to be pretty balanced. Magic Michelangelo. All right, I fell behind. Sorry, guys. I'm going to get caught up here. In a SuperFlex startup with a tight end premium of 2 points. Wow, that's a heavy premium. Okay. How early would you take a tight end, and who would you be targeting? So yeah, in a dynasty league, like it feels dirty to do it just because it seems a little too early, but I'm still going with Kyle Pitts is the guy you want to target. I would do it early, by the way. And it's tough because the problem is you're going to have to take Kyle Pitts in the first round of a startup. Not a move I want to make. I want to start off with quarterbacks. So, but if he happens to fall to, if you've got an early first round pick in the startup, for instance, and you went quarterback with that first pick, you got Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, somebody like that, with that first pick, and then Kyle Pitts makes it back to you, and then you're at the turn and you're going to get another quarterback right away. That's a great time to take Kyle Pitts. I would absolutely do that. I don't know that he's going to make it to you. He's going in the first round. We've got some SuperFlex ADP where he goes in the first round with a 1.5 point premium. So, an extra half point probably is going to push him into the middle of the first round. And that's a little too heavy. But I definitely would, I would target, the top tier guys kind of as early as you can. Certainly, I think it's too early to give up on Kelsey. I definitely think it's too early to give up on George Kittle. And then we saw Mark Andrews kind of come on late. There's some guys that I think you can probably get a little bit of a discount, even with that premium. I think that TJ Hawkinson is going to go a little bit too late. I think guys like Logan Thomas and Robert Tonyan, they're kind of forgotten guys just because of the injuries that kind of wiped out, the second half of their season. those are good ones. Those are, high volume, high target volume type guys. Uh, let's see. Austin Hooper could be a good one just because, man, what's left in Cleveland to catch passes? David Njoku's gone, obviously OBJ is gone. Sounds like Jarvis Landry could be gone. They're probably going wide receiver in the draft, but it's really hard to project a rookie pass catcher for any kind of significant volume. It happens. We just saw it with Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, but we don't want to project that, So, yeah, I think Austin Hooper ends up in a situation where there's just, man, Peter Howard would hate that, by the way. He would hate because we're really kind of talking about vacated targets at that point. But at the end of the day, those pass attempts, literally, they have to go somewhere, so yeah, there are a lot of sleeper type of guys. Dalton Schultz is a free agent, but he could definitely land in a spot where they target him just as much, if not more, as he was in Dallas, where they were surrounded by weapons and he still was a pretty big contributor to that offense. So, you put him on a roster that needs some pass catchers, and all of a sudden, he could be a very usable, cheap option for you. So there's a few of them. But yeah, I mean, I'm really kind of looking to, in a broader sense, I'm really just kind of looking to, with that heavy of a premium, what I would really like to do is, I still go quarterback early and often in any SuperFlex startup, kind of regardless of the format. But I'm also I'm kind of doing the same thing with tight end, because ultimately I would like to start as many tight ends as possible. So, obviously not in the SuperFlex spot, but beyond that, any starting tight end spots that you have and any flex spots that you have, man, get some tight ends in there if you can, as much of them as you can. You can even sacrifice the other pass catchers, sacrifice the wide receivers. Like, you're going to end up with decent wide receivers just because it's such a deep position. But, anytime you're looking at wide receivers, instead click over to tight ends and look at them, because, with that extra point for every reception, they're going to give you an advantage at flex that is going to make up the difference at wide receiver. So, yeah, like, I would start looking at them as soon as you can. And, I'd be willing to reach for them a little bit. I think that the way I would structure that roster, to be quite honest, is definitely start with some quarterbacks early. Try and get a stud running back maybe in the, third round, like between the third and the fifth round. And other than that, just hammer tight end until you've got enough of them. Like I said, fill all those flex spots, fill the one tight end spot or two tight end spots, whatever you've got. And then a couple of them on the bench too. Just hammer that position. Just come at them with an army of tight ends. You're taking them out of circulation for other people. Plus you're giving yourself a huge advantage that, like I said, it just kind of covers blemishes at other positions. All right, Jack, let's see. What running back tier could I get for DJ Moore or Chris Godwin straight up? Man, like, so it's a great time to make a move like that. So let me preface it by saying that, because wide receivers are very overvalued right now. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago here on SuperFlex Super Friday. I've been talking about it on the SuperFlex Super Show, and really kind of trying to drill down on what exactly happened? Because, I saw it, but I can't prove it other than what I witnessed playing in my various dynasty leagues, which was the wide receivers ended up being the advantage, the unfair advantage, particularly Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Those guys ended up being, that every week advantage that we typically get from running backs. Jonathan Taylor was a guy that you almost had to have in order to win a fantasy championship. But normally we've got a couple of those guys at running back. And normally they're actually an even bigger advantage than what Jonathan Taylor gave you. This year we didn't really have that, but we did get that from several of the wide receivers. And I've been trying to figure out, like, I keep calling it a wide receiver season. It was a wide receiver year. It was a great year for wide receivers. And now we come out of the 2021 season feeling like wide receivers are really kind of they're the safe investments. They're the high upside investments. Like they create the difference that you want. They create that advantage that you have to have. And to me, the truth is nothing has really changed. It's never changed. But, I was just trying to figure out how do I prove this? And I did an episode of the Super Show the other day with Peter Howard and kind of brought this up. That episode will drop here in the next couple days. I brought up this concept yet again and was just like, man, like I can't find a statistical basis for this, but it felt like wide receivers were scoring more than running backs, at least at the top end. And he said, yeah, but it wasn't a wide receiver heavy season. It was that the running backs were bad this season. And that just clicked. I still haven't found the statistical basis for this, but that's the reality of the situation. It wasn't even that they were that bad. They just weren't healthy. The guys that we typically see at the top, they didn't give us full seasons, and they didn't, they didn't have nearly as much upside as they usually have. And now we're just kind of feeling like, who are the running backs that we can trust? And so people end up drafting wide receivers because they do feel so much safer. They do feel so much more powerful than the running back position. But it's also because you look around at the running back tiers and you're like, what is left? Like, what the hell happened here? Last year we had this deep, top tier, and then another deep, second tier of guys. And all of a sudden, I mean, do you really feel like investing in Christian McCaffrey after, with the injury concerns? Do you really feel like drafting, Dalvin Cook going into his year 6, his sixth season, which we know ends up being kind of a usage cliff for running backs and an age cliff. We've got Derrick Henry going into year 7, 27, 28 years old. Alvin Kamara going into year 6, plus now he's got the legal stuff. So, you just kind of look around at the running back landscape and you're like, who can I trust here? Meanwhile, the wide receivers are looking awesome, right? And DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, the long-winded way of getting back to this point, DJ Moore and Chris Godwin look like, two of about almost, 20, 25 guys who could be wide receiver 1 type of guys for your roster. Those guys should be able to get you a much bigger return than they normally would have in the past if you're going straight for a running back. So first of all, this is definitely the time to do it. I would say that. Let's look at ADP just real quick. I'm not going to screen share it. It takes too long to set that up, but I'm going to find those guys in ADP. DJ Moore going in round 4, the 5th pick in round 4, one spot after Saquon Barkley, between Saquon Barkley and Austin Eckler. Other guys that went ahead of him, immediately ahead of him, J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson. Man, if you can get any of those guys straight up for DJ Moore, I'm doing it. I don't know about you. Chris Godwin also in the 4th round, just with the 12th pick. One spot ahead of rookie pick 101. So, Brees Hall, Isaiah Spiller went ahead of Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Elijah Mitchell. And then immediately after, Alvin Kamara, which we talked about that last time. Alvin Kamara is probably going to drop. So, I don't think that that's one that you want to target, even though he's within range. Man, yeah, I think I would look at those type of names and I would go after, particularly Antonio Gibson, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, and I would even consider Austin Eckler. He's also going into year 6. He's kind of at that usage cliff, but it's just so hard to find running backs that we trust right now. I don't know if you're going to get those guys, but I think that's where I would start. I think that that's the tier I would start with, just going off of ADP. It seems like they might at least be in range. You might at least have a conversation there. Back to Magic Michelangelo. What slot would you take in a 12-team SuperFlex startup with a 3-round reversal, which uses a Kentucky Derby format to determine draft slots? I love that, by the way. So I prefer auction startups. That's my favorite. Those are always the hardest to talk about because they're so, league specific. But if you're not going to do an auction startup, the only way to do it, as far as I'm concerned, is with a Kentucky Derby. I freaking love those. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it, but I think I would try to get, slightly later in the 1st round, just because of that 3rd round reversal. And here's the thing is, even if we end up going, looking at some of the quarterbacks who are going a little bit later in the 1st round. So, Lamar Jackson is falling quite a bit. That's someone that we need to talk about in this episode. Lamar Jackson is kind of a later, 1st round type of guy. Kyler Murray is dropping somewhat, although he's going to bounce back now that sounds like he's on good terms with the Cardinals again. Dak Prescott, those are Joe Burrow has really kind of been, for the most part, like second half of the 1st round type of guy. I probably wouldn't go for 12th overall. I would probably want to be in the neighborhood of like 8 or 9, but that way you're still going to get a quarterback there with that 1st pick who is still he's going to score similarly to the guys taken, in the first, 3 or 4 picks of the 1st round. You're still going to get a quarterback there who's going to give you quite a bit of stability. And then you get another pick, pretty soon after. And with that 3rd round reversal coming, you have all kinds of options with that 2nd pick. You can get your running back 1. You might be in range if you really wanted to go wide receiver. It's not a move I would make, but, again, a lot of people are feeling wide receiver right now. It feels like the kind of the safe option. So, you might be in range for, it's probably unlikely that you would be in range for Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but whoever you have in the next tier, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, any of those guys I think would be in range. I just think that you're going to have pretty stocked tiers with the 2nd pick. And I think that those tiers, including the quarterback tier, is still going to be pretty stocked for you with your 3rd pick early in the 3rd round. So I think that you're going to come away with, some anywhere in that like 8 to 10 range. I think you're going to come away with the best collection of 3 players. Josh R asks, can we expect anything out of Trey Sermon in year 2? What buy low running backs are on your list? I think so. I think Trey Sermon still has an opportunity. I know that Elijah Mitchell really kind of ran away with that job. I get it. We do have to keep in mind that Trey Sermon also kind of dealt with some injuries that kept him out of contention for that job. I won't say that that's the reason, that's the entire reason, because even when he was healthy, it didn't seem like he was particularly in the conversation. But I just heard, so we've got a show here on the DLF YouTube channel hosted by Cal Shoemake called Dynasty Refinery. And his second episode, he had Matt Waldman on here. Matt Waldman really just kind of laid it out and just kind of threw down the gauntlet and said, you know what, Trey Sermon is a better all-around back than Elijah Mitchell. Now, Elijah Mitchell might be a better fit for San Francisco, but, at the end of the day, here's what we know about running backs is that it kind of doesn't matter, who's better for the system, who's quote unquote more talented. At the end of the day, they're all going to end up getting on the field at some point because the guys just can't stay healthy. None of them can, so at some point, Trey Sermon is going to be on the field. And man, if he shows out in any way, especially the way Kyle Shanahan seems to approach the running back position, it's not quite the running back by committee that people make it sound like, but he really does kind of go with a little bit of a hot hand approach. And, if Trey Sermon in relief of Elijah Mitchell has a game or two that, Kyle Shanahan feels like, yeah, this is what we need for this offense, particularly with young quarterback, give us an opportunity for some check down work, pick up tough yardage when the defense knows that the run is coming, stuff like that. If that's Trey Sermon for even a game or two, Kyle Shanahan's going to pivot to him. He's done it before. He'll do it again. So, yeah, I think Trey Sermon, I really think any running back with any kind of, any kind of path into an NFL lineup also has the same path into your fantasy lineup. So I think Trey Sermon has that. As far as other buy low running backs, man, one that I love, I'm getting in here's 2 of them that I'm getting in most of my mock drafts so far. First of all is Deontay Foreman. I think they found the perfect complement for Derrick Henry. And again, Derrick Henry going into, year 6 is 28-year-old season. He's kind of at a cliff, and now we have an injury to actually point to and say, this could be the reason, this could be something that ends up nagging him, ends up keeping him out of the lineup. They've tried the old, Chris Johnson, Lendale White combos before. They've been trying that with guys like Dion Lewis, Darrington Evans, guys like that. They've tried that, and what they've really kind of found out is they don't need a change of pace. Like the advantage that Derrick Henry gives the Tennessee Titans offense is the ability to wear down a defense, and the ability to just slam into the line. Like, it has to be so annoying trying to tackle Derrick Henry. It's like trying to tackle a freaking bus. And they know that that's coming, and they just have to just bite the bullet and do it, just meet him head on. And it hurts them more than it hurts him. And that has to suck. But that's the advantage that Derrick Henry gives you. And, they've finally kind of come around to the idea that, let's just continue on with that. Even if we don't have Derrick Henry, let's get the next best thing, which is, another big boy like Deontay Foreman. Let's bring him in here and let him just kind of continue the work that Derrick Henry's been doing. It's just kind of a continuation of the same basic offense. So, I think that Deontay Foreman, he's a free agent, and I think that there's a good chance that somebody tries to lure him away with the idea that he becomes their Derrick Henry, their AJ Dillon, their big hammer. But I also think that he makes the most sense for the Tennessee Titans, and I think that they probably have recognized that as well. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them re-sign Deontay Foreman and for him to be, kind of a 1B to Derrick Henry's 1A in that offense. The other one is Dearness Johnson, who just looked the part, in relief of both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. He's a little bit buried on that roster right at the moment, but man, they could get a haul in return if they were to trade him away to a team that needs a running back. Cough, cough, Seattle. That's a 3-down workhorse type of back, catches the ball out of the backfield, good in pass protection. And then for me, my favorite quality in a running back is that explosion when they, the acceleration when they first get the ball in their hands. There's no dancing around in the backfield looking for a hole. They anticipate and they just blast through there, and that's Dearness Johnson. To me, that's a guy that very well could and should be an NFL starting running back somewhere in 2022. So those are some guys that I would buy low on, even if they don't end up in the best case scenario where they're a lead back at a different, with a different role. They're still guys that are going to command work even on their current rosters. Matthew Allen asked, what is the price for Jalen Waddle? 1 point PPR. I've been offered 223 firsts in Pat Freiermuth. Man, that's, I think you've got to, I think I would do that. That's pretty balanced if you don't have a tight end premium, I would say. There's kind of no reason to prioritize Freiermuth without a tight end premium. So I think he doesn't really move the needle. But 223 firsts, like, you're kind of hard pressed to find very many players that are going to command that type of draft capital in return. The old saying goes, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush. And to me, Jalen Waddle is kind of the bird in hand. I do think that he's probably a little easier to replace than those draft picks. They could very easily be running backs and quarterbacks. Those are not easy to replace. Those are both, pretty scarce positions. So the fact that you can get a replacement level player for Jalen Waddle and still get similar scoring would be the reason that I would make that move. But if you just ask me, in a vacuum, what is the value? I think 2023 first is probably, in consensus opinion, or, on a trade calculator, or, on a Twitter poll, whatever, it's probably a little light. I would still do it, but yeah, it's probably just a little bit off. Like, not even another first necessarily. Just a player, a player at a more premium position, a more valuable and more usable position than Pat Freiermuth at tight end without a tight end premium. And then if there's any kind of tight end premium, I think that you're good. I think that's a good return for Jalen Waddle. Zane, my man Zane, always a pleasure to get to listen to the SuperFlex dude. Thanks, man. And thanks for joining. Memos here as well. SuperFlex SuperFriday. Hell yes. Man, I'm glad to Glad to have you guys here. Freak Stomp 49er, Kamara or Kareem Hunt and a 2023 first. Man, at this point, I think that I would take a 2023 first straight up for Alvin Kamara. And man, like I know that that's hot takey. I get it. Like that feels incendiary of me to say. I'm a little nervous about the legal stuff. And that again, we come back to the fact that this is a running back going into year 6. He's at a usage cliff. He's at an age cliff. He's at a career expectancy cliff. And plus there's the legal stuff. Plus there's a fact that the New Orleans Saints could absolutely suck this year. They're not left with a whole lot, without it. Like, it sounds like Michael Thomas could be gone. Obviously not sure what's happening at quarterback. And, and then you lose the guy who was the glue, who was holding this whole thing together, in Sean Payton, so it's, yeah, I love Dennis Allen. He's a defensive mind. He's not the guy to rebuild this offense, which is what it has desperately needed for the last couple of years now, basically since Drew Brees retired. So yeah, man, I'm just out on Alvin Kamara. I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that and don't want to talk about that, but and here's the thing. You're probably getting out a little early on Alvin Kamara. There's absolutely a chance that Alvin Kamara gives us another top 12 type season in 2022. Like, the one thing that you can say about that New Orleans Saints offense is there should be an opportunity for the running backs, because there's not going to be a whole lot else that works, right? Like, unless they bring in, a running type quarterback, trade for Tyler Huntley. I mean, give this starting job to Taysom Hill. I don't know why not, other than the fact that Sean Payton was the only guy who believed in him. Draft Malik Willis, something like that. That's kind of the only thing that could really cut into the workload that's available to Alvin Kamara, but it's a 1-year proposition. And then, I think that they're looking to get out from under his contract going into 2023. I don't know that anybody's going to be falling all over themselves to go get him. And I don't know that there's going to be much of an opportunity available to him. And that's just kind of presupposing that he beats all of this legal stuff too. So yeah, to me, like, that's a great way to get out from under Alvin Kamara now, and kind of get max value for him, even though it feels light right now. A year from now, you're going to feel great about that move. Magic Michelangelo said Dalton Schultz is a sneaky pick. Yeah, I like that one a lot. I really like Dalton Schultz going forward. Like I said, I mean, he makes a lot of sense in Dallas, and that's one of the offenses with the fewest, targets really available to a tight end like him. So there's some good opportunities out there for him, and Dallas still might be the best, even though it's on paper it's not a great one for a pass catcher. Zane, how are you ranking the backup quarterbacks who may be moving to a new team and becoming starters? So Marcus Mariota, Gardner Minshew, Mitch Trubisky, to name a few. Yeah, I mentioned Tyler Huntley. I think that he's one of those guys. I have an entire tier of them in you can find my rankings, my SuperFlex Dynasty rankings at dynastyleaguefootball.com. But yeah, I've got Tyler Huntley actually in the tier above all of these guys. But, Gardner Minshew, Taylor Heinicke, Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, Mitchell Trubisky, Drew Lock, Mike White. Those are all guys who I think could be in the conversation for a starting job somewhere. And and I do have I that's how I have it ranked, the way I just listed it. But I think that there might need to be an adjustment to this actually because to me, Mariota and Trubisky, those guys, I stand by having Huntley in the tier above those guys just because if he was to find a starting job, that's just fantasy goodness for days. He's almost just like a replica of Lamar Jackson in the way he plays. Might even be a more accurate passer. So, like, having both of those guys starting in the NFL would be a great thing for us for fantasy purposes. But beyond that, Mariota and Trubisky, those guys are actual free agents. Those guys are actually available to teams just outright, Whereas Gardner Minshew, you have to trade for him. Same with Heineke and Darnold and Drew Lock and Mike White. Mike White actually is a free agent, so he's kind of interesting. I don't know if he did enough to. I don't think anybody's going to bring in Mike White to be the starter. I think he's somebody that you bring in to compete. So, I kind of stand by his ranking as well. But yeah, to me, Trubisky is kind of number one. Out of the rest of that group, Minshew, Heineke, Darnold, and Drew Lock, and Marcus Mariota. I'd put Mitchell Trubisky over all those guys. I think he's the most likely to find a starting job, and it's based on, so there's the draft pedigree, of course. There's the starting experience in the NFL. The fact that he's 27 years old. And he just came out of that Brian Daboll system. He gets away from Matt Nagy and gets to spend a year with Brian Daboll, learning behind Josh Allen. As they're still, by the way, kind of grooming Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen isn't a finished product. That's a crazy thing about, a guy. That's a crazy thing to say about a guy who was in the discussion to be league MVP. And Mitchell Trubisky was involved in that process, so I think I would rank him number one. And then Marcus Mariota, I think, is probably number two. I would love to put Gardner Minshew ahead of him. But again, you have to trade for Gardner Minshew. And that's a team, too, that who knows how they actually feel about their current starting quarterback. They might want Gardner Minshew on roster just to compete with Jalen Hurts. So Marcus Mariota probably has a better shot at finding a starting job somewhere. Again, starting experience, draft pedigree. There's all that stuff going for him. 28 years old, so he's right there with Trubisky. And what little we saw him get on the field for the Raiders, he was effective. He was very effective, both throwing and running the ball. So I wouldn't rule him out as an NFL starter. I think that there are probably more guys who are in line to find a starting job before he does. Trubisky, I would almost guarantee he finds a starting job somewhere. Mariota, I would put it more at 60%. More likely than not, but just barely. So yeah, those are the main guys. Minshew, if somebody traded for him, I think that he would be, I would put him up there with Tyler Huntley, but I think it's going to be tough to pry him away. Yeah. And then there's still Drew Lock. I can't stand Drew Lock, but I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody take a chance with him either. Mark Kamen asks Tyreek Hill for Elijah Moore and Michael Carter. Ooh, wow. Tough one, because I've talked about the New York Jets quite a bit on this show, and the fact that I think that entire offense is kind of a buy. The problem being I don't think that you want both at the same time. I don't think that you want parts of both the passing game and the running game on the same roster. It's hard to get them both into the same lineup because they kind of cannibalize each other. Every time Michael Carter scores a touchdown, that's one more opportunity, or that's one fewer opportunity for Elijah Moore to score a touchdown. So, whereas if you had Michael Carter and Devonta Smith instead of Elijah Moore, they could score touchdowns simultaneously. So the upside of your lineup just immediately, goes up by a whole other player essentially. So, um, yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with Tyreek Hill, but man, that one's tough for me because I really want pieces of that Jets offense. I think that they're kind of sneaky, and I don't believe that there's a huge gap between Tyreek Hill and Elijah Moore. I think there's still a gap. I think Tyreek Hill is kind of still in the elite tier. Elijah Moore's not there yet. But, I think that they're going to score similarly enough that you can make it up with a running back. And I love Michael Carter. And I love loading up on running backs. I love turning wide receiver depth into running back depth. So it's tempting for me, really tempting, but I don't think I could do it just because I don't want to stack the running game and the passing game from an offense, especially one that, like, this is still speculative. I love that offense going forward, but it's speculative. It's not like getting multiple pieces of an explosive offense that we already know is going to be explosive, like the Chiefs or the Rams. Let's see. Yeah, we talked about that one. Thanks for that question, Zane. Um, Freak Stomper for 49er. Did I just fart? I wouldn't know. You guys would know if I did, but yeah, sure enough, he did. Thanks anyway, guys. Let's see. West Coast Chiefer, Lance is my guy. Okay. My reason for projecting late 23 first is my roster, given unforeseen injury. Lance, Mac Jones, Jared Goff, Dalvin Cook, Rashad Penny, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Allen Robinson, Dalton Schultz, 108, 112. Yeah. So, kind of back to that one that we started with. I get it. And like I said, if Trey Lance is your guy, I think that that's a reasonable trade that you made. Just to get guys that you feel confident in, setting the lineup, guiding them to a championship. There's value in that, putting together a roster that you feel good about. So yeah, I think it's fine. I still wouldn't project. I still wouldn't put the cart before the horse as far as projecting your 2023 first, but I definitely get it, and I think that you've got a better chance at making it a late one now that you're putting together a roster that you really like. FF Lefty adopted an orphan in a SuperFlex 2 tight end premium. Yeah, man, we've got some heavy premiums going on for the tight ends tonight. I like it. And the team is pretty good, with the exception of quarterback. Lamar Jackson, Kyle Trask, and that is it. Full draft capital. What do you do? Man, yeah. You know what? I think I would go cheap at quarterback, and I would take several shots at him. You might even consider trading away Lamar Jackson, to be honest with you. I would definitely trade away some draft picks, because if you've got a roster that's pretty set other than the quarterback position, you don't want to draft rookie quarterbacks. That roster is just going to be wasted on the fact that you've got quarterbacks that are not ready to break out and not ready to support the rest of your lineup. So either, to me, it's one of two things. Either you tear the entire roster down and start building around young quarterbacks and then, and young wide receivers. This is a pretty decent rookie class to do that in, but it's not as fun to take what sounds like a roster that's ready to compete and just strip it down and go into productive struggle for a year. I don't think I could bring myself to do it, honestly. So the other option would be, to go cheap at quarterback, but that's where you really want some quarterback depth. So, I think rather than, again, I wouldn't draft rookie quarterbacks. They're not going to support the rest of your roster this year. They're just kind of going to leave you hanging. I think you want established guys, and I think you want to find some guys who are relatively cheap, like, Jameis Winston, I think, is a great one. He's pretty cheap right now because nobody seems to believe that he's going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. We just talked about Mitchell Trubisky. All of these guys can probably be acquired for a second round pick right now, which is crazy. To me, I've always said a starting NFL quarterback should be worth a first round pick because you can't replace them at the end of the first round with a rookie pick. You're not going to find a starting quarterback with pick 112 in your rookie draft. So this is, if that's your chance to get a starting quarterback, it should be worth a first round pick. But the fact that they're not actually starting quarterbacks right now means you can probably get them for a second round pick. You can get them pretty cheap. The other thing you can do is tier down from Lamar Jackson. There's a possibility that you send Lamar Jackson, you might be able to get 2 quarterbacks in return. So, one of the hardest things to do in SuperFlex is adding quarterbacks without trading away quarterbacks. And that's the main reason that I say trade Lamar Jackson. I think that he gives you more flexibility. He gives you more trade ammo because it's so much easier for somebody to trade you a quarterback when they're getting one in return. And in fact, they're going to be willing to give you a downgrade, and you're still going to get a good quarterback in return. Even though you're tearing down, even though you're downgrading, so back to the Jets, Zach Wilson. Like, I think that Zach Wilson in a trade for Lamar Jackson, most likely scenario is Zach Wilson is probably the sweetener. Like the other player that you get in return, whether it's, if you still have a need at running back, for instance, because who doesn't? We always need more running backs. Like, I think that you probably get a running back in a higher tier than Zach Wilson in the quarterback tier, plus Zach Wilson, if that makes sense. I think that you get a good starting running back with Zach Wilson as the sweetener in return for Lamar Jackson. So those are the 2 moves I would be making. I would be trading away draft picks for quarterbacks, and I would be trading away Lamar Jackson to tier down at quarterback. Buck asks, Joe Burrow and a 2023 second for Russell Wilson, Austin Eckler, and Chris Godwin. So let's see. Eckler. Yeah, the Eckler side. So because to me, Russell Wilson and Joe Burrow, they're still going to score similarly. And that's kind of regardless of where Russell Wilson ends up. Even though, like, it sounds like most likely scenarios he stays in Seattle, he's throwing to Tyler Lockett, he's throwing to DK Metcalf. there's got to be more of a commitment to protecting him, number one, and number two, getting a little bit more creative with the offensive play call. He's been warning them for 2 years now, like, make these changes, fix these things, or else I'm out of here. I'm gonna force my way out of here. So if they're able to convince him to stay, those are the things that have to happen. So I also, man, the analytics guys hate this, um, because this is a narrative which is, which is compelling to me because there's a trend. There's a long running trend, but there's no like statistical basis for this. There's some psychology behind it. It's like some kind of pseudoscience is behind this a little bit, but nothing hard and fast. No real reason for this other than the fact that it always happens every single season, which is the team that loses a Super Bowl ends up having a down year the following season. So I'm nervous about Joe Burrow. Right now I have him ranked as my quarterback 3 in Dynasty, but I'm nervous about him. I'm nervous about T. Higgins. I'm nervous about Joe Mixon. I'm even a little bit nervous about Jamar Chase, mostly because of the way people are valuing him right now. The fact that you have to take him in the first round of a SuperFlex startup, that's pretty crazy to me. If he were to fall to the second round, I'd be just fine with him. I'm not worried about him to a point where I think he's just going to be absolutely useless to you in 2022. I don't think that's ever going to be the case with Jamar Chase. I just don't think that he's going to return the type of production that you're expecting when you take him in the first round of a startup. But yeah, so there's reason for concern with Joe Burrow, even if that offense ends up being just fine, functioning just fine, beating that trend, beating that narrative. You still have you're still going to get similar scoring from Russell Wilson. Chris Godwin, I mean, is a free agent who, even if he ends up in a not the greatest situation, at the very least, we've got to acknowledge that he's worth more than that 2023 second, and he probably both covers the value of that 2023 second, plus makes up the difference between Russell Wilson and Joe Burrow. And then you're getting Austin Eckler for free at that point. That's my dirty math on it. So yeah, I would take the Russell Wilson side. It always feels kind of gross to trade away a young elite quarterback like Joe Burrow, but man, that return is just too much to pass up on. My man Eric John Flynn is here. What coaching staff changes are you most excited about for dynasty relevant players? Man, that's a good one too. I think I'm probably gonna. How do you not go with the Giants getting Brian Daboll? There were a lot of really good moves. The Minnesota Vikings getting Kevin O'Connell, that's a great one. But just the success that we've seen Brian Daboll have with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and honestly, not a great receiving core otherwise. Never had an elite type of running game, but it's still been like with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and kind of a bunch of role player type guys, replacement level type guys. They have had one of the best offenses in the league for the last several years. So, man, you gotta love, what he might be able to do with. Let's just start with, to me, a guy that I've been saying is the number one buy in all of fantasy football, Saquon Barkley. Like, let's just start with him. Who knows what happens at quarterback? I think they're going to be fine, kind of regardless. You finally get Kenny Golladay back healthy. There's some weapons there in the passing game, but above all else, what is he going to be able to do with Saquon Barkley? And, making that passing game credible helps that much more for Saquon as well. So That's my favorite. And like above all else, I just think that it created such a buy opportunity for us with Saquon Barkley in particular. That for that reason alone, that's probably my favorite. Rice Cake Randy asks, how confident are you feeling if you walk out of a rookie draft with Chris Olave, George Pickens, Kyron Williams, let's see, Tyler Algier. I'm not sure who Tolbert is. I'm not that far into the rookie class, to be honest with you. Rashad White and Damian Pierce. Overall good. You're getting a lot of running backs, which I like. Just kind of loading up on running backs. I would say I would call it a B plus only because I would want either Chris Olave or George Pickens, not both. But I mean, those are two pretty underrated wide receivers that you're getting a little bit later. And then the fact that like you're just loading up on running back, which to me, that's what the rookie draft is for. Hammer running back, because they're all going to have a role. So I love that. Yeah. Replace Pickens with another running back for me, and I'm giving that draft an A plus. Kyle Senra is here. Man, I haven't talked to Kyle in a minute. Hey, SuperFlex dude. What's up, Kyle? West Coast Chiefer says 12 team SuperFlex PPR. I traded Fields 106, 206 for Lamar Jackson in another league. Thoughts? Yeah, that seems about right. It might be a little heavy, but I really don't mind that, because I think at 106 you're probably in range to take wide receivers. And it's a little bit of a reach to get any of the running backs that are still left. Most likely there won't be any quarterbacks with much of a path to start, at least not right away. So I think you're probably pretty locked in on wide receivers at 106. And I don't want to clog up my roster with wide receiver depth. So if you're good at wide receiver, 106 kind of doesn't have a ton of value to you other than as sweetener in a trade like this to tier up at quarterback. So yeah, I like it. I mean, I think that if you put it through a calculator, a Twitter trade poll, you're probably going to find out that you lost. But I don't necessarily agree. And I still think that Fields and Lamar Jackson probably score pretty similarly, but I think that you get more upside with Lamar Jackson. You probably get a higher floor as well. And I don't think that you're giving up anything that you can't live without. So I like that move. Memo, what's your take on I never get his name right. Backup running back for the Vikings. Kene Wongwu? Something like that. Anyways, Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn, J.J. Taylor, DJ Dallas. Yeah, I mean, those are all guys who are likely going to have a role. J.J. Taylor is the one I wonder about the most with James White coming back from injury. I believe he's a free agent, but I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back and to be their primary pass catching back. Right at the moment, DJ Dallas is the starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks. I know that Chris Carson is on his way back, and this is hard for me because I love Chris Carson. That was one of my first big hits for a deep sleeper in fantasy football. So for me to bail on Chris Carson is particularly tough, but I got to do it. It's like that's the same injury that Peyton Manning had, and he couldn't feel the football. Well, Chris Carson's job is to hold the football and protect the football. If he can't even feel it, ugh. And that's a guy who already had some fumbling issues early in his career. So um, I'm not planning on Chris Carson being the starting quarterback or starting running back, sorry, for the Seattle Seahawks in 2022, and probably never again. Like that's kind of how I'm feeling about that. So yeah, right at the moment, I don't think it'll stay this way, but right at the moment, DJ Dallas is a starter there. Right at the moment, Ronald Jones is a starter in Tampa Bay. They're, I don't know that they're necessarily going to rebuild it, but they're going to have to reload a little bit. You're going to have to teach a new quarterback, a new system. And I think they're going to rely on the running game. So, I think that there's some value there just in the situation. You don't have to like the talent. That's the thing when it comes to running backs. The talent almost doesn't matter, unless it's like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey type of talent. Like those guys are some of the best football players in the league, in the world. So, that's where the talent actually makes a difference. But for a lot of these guys, it's not about talent, it's about opportunity. And those two guys, Ronald Jones and DJ Dallas, right now are in line for an opportunity. But every one of those guys is going to get an opportunity at some point. So, I'm trying to find ways to keep all of those guys on my roster, if at all possible. I'd way rather make cuts at wide receiver than let any of those running backs go. And, if you can consolidate at wide receiver, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you've got some of those guys, Quintez Cephas still just kind of hanging out on your roster, that's always my favorite. That's like the funniest one to me because Quintez Cephas just somehow ended up on every dynasty roster in every single league. It's just like it's the one player that there's 12 copies of. Every time somebody shows me their roster, Quintez Cephas is on it. I don't understand how that happened. But yeah, he's an oddity in that way. But I would cut him, before I would cut one of these running backs, any of them. Mike Valverde's here too. Should I take Malik Willis or Jalen Hurts? Ooh, uh, uh man, that's tough. That's really tough. Um, I think I'm gonna go with Malik Willis. I'm not afraid of Jalen Hurts the way a lot of people are. I don't know that there's a whole lot to the idea that he's just not going to be a starter for the Eagles or anybody else going forward. I don't agree with that. But I think Malik Willis is headed for significant draft capital, number one, and number two, probably to a pretty good a pretty good situation, a pretty good scheme. And then, I mean, we know all about the athletic gifts that Malik Willis brings to whatever job he ends up getting. But like it's kind of feeling right now like Malik Willis, Matt Corral, those are the two guys who are pretty much locked in to become NFL starters. And the only reason that you really shy away from these rookie quarterbacks is, if we're not totally convinced that they're going to be NFL starters. So, that's the only thing keeping me from just going all in on Kenny Pickett is I don't know for sure that he's going to end up with a starting job. Or Sam Howell feels just as risky. Carson Strong is a guy who I would love to see as a starting quarterback. That's where I'm planting my flag is on Carson Strong, but it's just such a big caveat. He has to find somebody who's actually willing to take a chance on him as a starter, not just bring him in as a backup, but, take him early, make him your starter. And I don't know that that's going to happen. But Malik Willis, it will. And I think that there are going to be teams trading up to get Malik Willis. So I think he's going to end up in a good situation. He's going to be a starter, and he's going to have a much more significant leash, more substantial leash than Jalen Hurts. So yeah, I'll take Malik Willis. I don't love it because I think both of those guys are going to be very good options for you in SuperFlex leagues next year. But yeah, slight edge to Malik Willis there. Addy, Mayonnaise Hayes said he just traded Aaron Rodgers. Okay. I'm going to stop you there. Why are you trading away Aaron Rodgers? All right. What did he say? They just traded Aaron Rodgers for a 2023 first and a second and Keyshawn Vaughn on what I guess is now a rebuilding team. Like, he didn't even have a question. He's probably not even here anymore right now. He probably just came here just long enough to tell me, yeah, I traded away Aaron Rodgers for like kind of nothing. Here's the problem, Addy. So you just traded away the league MVP for a 2023 first, and now he's going to make a later first than what it would have been. But you did it just to do it, didn't you? Be honest. I get it. Last time I said Aaron Rodgers is a weirdo, I got some some unhappy comments about that on the YouTube video. And then this week it comes out that he did that freaking cleanse that just had him crapping his pants for 2 straight weeks. And we wondered why he was tweeting weird stuff, posting weird stuff on Instagram. So yeah, he was evacuating from both ends on purpose. Yeah, that's going to happen. And yes, he is a weirdo. I'm not even talking about put politics aside. The dude is weird. But he is still one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the entire NFL. Don't at me, Addison. Trade back for him if you can. Ridley Truther, who's also helping out with some SuperFlex mocks right now, by the way. I think you might still be on the clock. It's been a few hours. Maybe you made that pick before you came in and graced us with your presence. But if not, go make your pick. And then I'll answer your question here. Doing a SuperFlex PPR 12-team startup. We're in the early 20s rounds. Any dart throw sleepers you suggest, I can scrape off the bottom. Man, yeah, I do. So I mentioned Dearness Johnson earlier. I don't know if he's still going to be around, but if he is, that's one that I absolutely love. Let me look at ADP in the early 20s. Some of the names include Tyler Johnson. Man, that should be a good one if you need any more wide receiver depth. That could be a starter on an NFL team next year. Raheem Mostert, kind of. Cedric Wilson takes over the kind of the third, especially if Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup leave in free agency. Cedric Wilson is the number 3 option, 3 or 4. Depending on Tony Pollard, if he's on the field or not. So there's some guys. Robert Tonyan is still going pretty late. I mentioned him earlier. He was just the injury just kind of derailed his season, and then it was out of sight, out of mind. Chris Evans is going pretty late. I kind of mentioned the Bengals and what they're in for after losing the Super Bowl. A lot of what ends up happening is because, it's a longer season than most, and then a shorter off season as a result. We end up seeing some injuries. Running back is, it's just look at their job description. It's the most, man, injury prone is the wrong word. What am I looking for here? They're the most susceptible to injury just based on what they do for a living. So, Joe Mixon misses some time. Both Samaje Perine and Chris Evans are going in that area. To me, Chris Evans brings a lot more athleticism to the position, better pass catcher. Samaje Perine is brutal to watch. He's so slow. Like, yeah, he scored that touchdown in the AFC Championship, and it was just painful to watch. I just wanted to like pick up my PlayStation controller and hold down the speed button. Just like, go, man, come on, power it up a little. But yeah, he just doesn't have it in him. Amari Rogers is going pretty late. Jarrett Patterson is going pretty late. And then let's see, looking at my rankings, some later names. Traquan Smith, kind of. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel great about a lot of those guys later, but Trinity Benson is one that I think is super sneaky. That's a guy that I've been watching for a while now, and just very crisp, very smooth route runner, who I think could get the attention of Jared Goff there in Detroit. Marlon Mack, Jamar Jefferson, Anthony Schwartz. Those are definitely some guys. And then, man, load up on draft picks. Assuming that you've got rookie picks in the startup, which you should. That's totally the way to do it. But I know you're probably not the commissioner and probably don't have control over that. But if they are, yeah, just load up on some of those later draft picks. I talked to Matt Hicks a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that you're going to get some outstanding value in the third and fourth round of rookie drafts. So, load up on those picks. People don't feel great about the top of this draft, understandably. But, yeah, when you get into those later rounds, it's going to be still pretty stocked. Like, you're still going to be in the second or third tier at both running back and wide receiver. So, guys like he mentioned Jerome Ford, and Christian Watson, and my favorite name, Charleston Rambo. Such a cool name. I think that there are going to be some good picks there in the rookie draft as well, if you can take some rookie picks. Rice Cake Randy says, I'm rebuilding an orphan, and my quarterbacks are Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, and Taysom Hill. However, my earliest pick is a 107, and don't see one of the top three quarterbacks falling to me. Yeah, I kind of don't think so either. And again, it feels like there are two guys who are really for sure locked in as starting NFL quarterbacks coming in as rookies. It's Malik Willis and it's Matt Corral. And you know what? Matt Corral could end up in a situation where he's still, he might have a bridge quarterback ahead of him too. So, it might be a while before we see him too. So, yeah, if this is a team that's ready to compete otherwise, 107 is not going to be the place for you to get a quarterback. I think that's where you trade that pick away for a veteran quarterback instead. And I think that you're going to get a decent one, with 107. I think you'll get a decent return. Darren Johnson asks, what would you pay to buy a Kenny Golladay? I don't think I would. I guess that's the easy answer. If you're a believer in Kenny Golladay, and what I will say is his value is certainly depressed right now. Love that Brian Daboll move coming in as head coach. Part of the problem is it sounds like they're probably sticking with Daniel Jones at quarterback. Don't love that. But yeah, it's Kenny Golladay at least is going to be on the field, which he wasn't in 2021. So, it feels like his value is depressed to a point where the expectation is that he's just not going to be healthy like ever again. So yeah, I'm kind of talking myself into this for you, Darren. I think that Kenny Golladay is a little bit of a buy. I just think that there are a lot of ways to find wide receiver production. I don't think that you should necessarily have to pay a whole lot. But everybody does have a price. So I think this is a fair question. And to me, the price is probably like a late second round pick, late second round rookie pick, or the player equivalent of that. I think I would go mid second. I would go mid second. I don't think that I could give away an early second round pick for Galladay right at the moment. I just think that, even though I think that he'll probably outperform the guys who are going to be in that area in your rookie draft. So, Chris Olave, Drake London could absolutely be late first, early second. George Pickens, guys like that are likely to be available kind of in the early second round. I think he's going to outperform them, but I think that their value, certainly the pick is worth quite a bit more because it represents a range of players that includes all those guys. But even once they're actually in the league, I think they're probably still going to have quite a bit more value than Kenny Galladay. So it's really just that you shouldn't have to pay that much. I think value-wise, I don't think you should have to pay more than like a mid-second for him. And if you can get that, to me, that's kind of the highest I would go. But if you can get that, I think that you're probably going to get a return production-wise. But I guess my other word of caution there is make sure you've got a starting spot for him if you're going to do that. If you don't, I think probably that's where I initially said late second, because I don't envision starting him very often. I would want him kind of for bye weeks in the event of injuries. That, to me, that's what you really kind of want Kenny Galladay to be for your roster. And I don't think that that's worth more than, kind of a throwaway type pick, like a late second. Rice Cake Randy says, thanks for the feedback. I always enjoy the streams. First time asking a question. Hell yeah, man. We'll come back and ask questions anytime you got them. It's like I said at the top, I get to all of them. Sometimes it takes a while, but I'll get to every single one of them. And always appreciate it and always enjoy. Like, this is, I say this every single time I do one of these, but this is fun for me. Like, this is how I want to spend my free time. Like, if I'm not playing Nintendo 64 with my wife, I want to be talking about fantasy football. Those are the things that I do to unwind. Those are fun for me. So you guys are kind of fueling me. You guys are giving me something to do and some entertainment, and hopefully it's useful to you as well, but hopefully it's not totally self-serving and self-indulgent. But yeah, I just I appreciate the questions and I appreciate the conversation. Magic Michelangelo started us off in not first overall, but kind of wrapping us up too, it looks like. So in a 12-team SuperFlex startup, how would you rank Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields, and when you begin targeting them? I'm sticking with Trevor Lawrence first overall there. So the story's not written. We can definitely explain away his poor rookie season. So I'm not ready to give up. I think that there's way too much evidence that he can be one of the best in the world at this, from what we saw in college. And we have a lot more evidence of that than evidence that he's a bust after one season in a bad situation, surrounded by stupid BS drama, from the head coach. So I'm not ready to write off Trevor Lawrence. I think that you're probably, well, let's look at ADP actually real quick. He is not quite a first rounder. Looks like he's a mid-second rounder right now, and he's going ahead of those guys. So the ADP I'm looking at, and this one's not on the DLF website, but these are the mock drafts that I ran late in January and included rookie picks. So to me, it's a little bit more robust just because it has all those rookie picks in it. And Trevor Lawrence is going with the 7th pick of the second round. Trey Lance with the 11th pick of the second round, and then Justin Fields with the 3rd pick of the 3rd round. So like they're really pretty close together. And I think I agree with the ADP in this case. I don't agree with Aaron Rodgers at 302 behind Trey Lance and Trevor Lawrence. I don't agree with that, but that's a totally different conversation. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, then Trey Lance, then Justin Fields for me, and that's how they have it on ADP as well. So I agree with that. And then yeah, it looks like if you've got a late first round pick, you're probably going to have to take one of those guys at the turn. With that early second round pick. If you have an early first round pick, you should still have a shot at least one of those guys, if not your choice between the three when it comes back to you. Memo asks, Broncos wide receiver room. Judy ever going to be the alpha? Man, that's my team right there too. But I don't think Judy is an alpha. I really don't. I think he can be fine. I think he can be useful to you for fantasy purposes. I think he can be in that bucket of, kind of replacement level players, which is most of the wide receiver position. Like it sounds insulting to say it, to call him replacement level. But the truth of the matter is, like, the reason I say replacement level is because there's literally, 30 or 40 of those wide receivers who are all going to score similarly. And I think Jerry Jeudy falls into that. I mean, the quarterback play has been atrocious. He dealt with injuries here in his second year, which should have been the breakout year. So, again, kind of like Trevor Lawrence, I don't think this story is written yet. I think it's way too soon to bail. But if in terms of being an alpha, being an every week rubber stamp starter for fantasy purposes, being, a high volume guy, I don't think that that's ever going to be the case with Jerry Jeudy. I think that he's actually kind of one of those wide receivers that's going to make it, it's going to be a little bit predictive with him. It's going to be it's going to be predictable. Sorry. You're going to see it coming because he works better against man defense than zone defense. And Courtland Sutton, or, whoever they end up with, if it's not Courtland Sutton, it's probably because it's Devontae Adams catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. But, it kind of works better against zone coverage. So, you can kind of see it coming. You're going to say, all right, this defense primarily plays kind of a zone and tries to bracket the wide receivers down the field. And, they're going to be able to close off passing lanes for Jerry Jeudy. And so I'm going to put him on the bench here. And then the next week, he's going to be man up, and he just carves those guys up. Like, he creates separation one-on-one, like very few players in this league. So, that's the nice thing. I think you're going to see it coming, but I don't think he's ever going to be one of those every week, got to have him in the lineup type of guys. I don't think he's ever going to be that. And I don't think he's ever going to be the alpha for his NFL team either. But yeah, I think that it's way too early to bury him. So I've got a few more questions that I need to get to, and if you guys want to throw in some stuff, um, absolutely feel free. I'm here until all of this stuff gets answered. Zach Reed, Zach Reed, Tacit Assassin 13. That's a guy that I need to talk to. Need him back on the SuperFlex Super Show. You're getting a DM very, very soon. Whether or not Judy pans out, John Hogue is an alpha for sure. Whew, man, that's a lot to live up to. For a guy who at 40 years old just barely started growing a beard. But you never know. We'll see. Maybe I'll get there. Zach with the bald head and the beard, like that's an alpha look right there. That's like old school bare knuckle boxer type of look. I couldn't pull that off. That's alpha. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, let me answer some questions from Twitter real quick. And like I said, if you guys have anything else, feel free, jump in, throw them in for me. And otherwise, I'm gonna knock these ones out, and I'm just gonna talk until you guys leave. Essentially, that's my program. That's how I roll. That's how I do this. When you guys are tired of it, I'll probably talk a little bit longer. It's just me talking to the wall, and then finally just pass out right where I sit. So Nathaniel Broughton asked me a couple questions, 3 questions to be exact, on Twitter. The first one was, preparing for a 14-team Superflex startup, how many quarterbacks do you recommend I come out with? Standard starting requirements, essentially. To me, I mean, I don't want to go, off the rails with quarterback extreme and just bore you guys to tears or anything. Especially an hour, over an hour and a half into this thing. I don't want to just turn this into something that I don't want you guys groaning like, oh God, here we go. Quarterback extreme. Just take all the freaking quarterbacks. But to me, the more teams you have, the more important it is that there's going to be even fewer of them available throughout the life of this dynasty. So, where in a 12-team league, there's a chance that guys like, Mitchell Trubisky, he could have been on waivers, depending on the size of rosters too, of course. But, Trubisky could have been on waivers for a minute. He could have been available for free. Tyler Huntley probably came off of waivers, might even still be there in shallower leagues. But when you get to 14 teams, I mean, people are seriously just picking it clean at quarterback. You just don't have anybody available. People are just kind of taking lotto tickets because they just don't have depth. They're just like, man, just give me any quarterback with a pulse. Like I always say, like, I don't even call them a quarterback if they don't start. It's very, very insulting of me. It's very condescending and disrespectful, the way I talk about backup quarterbacks. I say they're not even quarterbacks, but it's kind of an easy way for us to organize the quarterback position to say, yeah, you've got 5 players there. None of them is an actual quarterback. You don't have quarterbacks, because then, it kind of reframes it a little bit, where people think that they went quarterback extreme, but it's a bunch of backup guys. It's Kyle Trask, it's Jordan Love, it's Taysom Hill. It's like, you don't have quarterbacks. You've got the guys who stand around holding clipboards. You don't have quarterbacks, and you need quarterbacks. So, but those guys end up being kind of at a premium when it's that scarce. In a 14-team league, the quarterbacks are that scarce that people are taking chances at players like that. So, yeah, to me, it just becomes that much more important. You don't have to take my word for it. I'm making more of an effort here in 2022 than I did in 2021 to represent other strategies other than quarterback extreme and other than the SuperFlex flywheel. So what I will say is, just like any other league, I think that you can get by with 3 quarterbacks if 2 of them are, solid rubber stamp starter type of guys. I think that you probably have to handcuff them, which people don't wanna do either. I don't wanna handcuff my quarterbacks, but, you still gotta make sure that you can fill out a lineup, number 1, if somebody gets hurt, and number 2, ideally, keep a quarterback at the super flex position at all times. Again, if somebody gets injured, you've gotta figure out a way to get quarterbacks into your lineup still. So, I to me, the answer is still to it's a version of quarterback extreme where instead of 5 starting quarterbacks, you've got, you know, 3 starting quarterbacks and your 2 rubber stamp guys, you handcuffed them. It's still extreme, and, you don't have, those 2 handcuff guys, they're not starting considerations, so to me, it's not worth doing, but that's kind of the alternative to QBX. Zach says, 14 team QBX can really drive some panic and potential overpays. See, yeah, that too. I like it more the thinner the quarterback pool is overall. Yeah, I do too. Like, to me, I was talking with Addison Hayes the other a couple weeks ago now about how quarterbacks are overvalued in Superflex, and how it's not really about the scoring; it's more about the scarcity. And kind of one of the fixes that I think we talked about it off air. I know that I've discussed this with him before. Maybe it didn't come up last time, but we've talked about this before. But kind of the real fix is to have a positional limit, have a positional maximum on quarterbacks. Say you can only have 3 quarterbacks, you can only have 4 quarterbacks on roster. I freaking hate that because I rely so much on the fact that, first of all, I can create so many scoring advantages for myself every single week with those 5 starting NFL quarterbacks on my roster. But beyond that, the trade power that you've got, the currency that you have on your roster, especially when everyone else is panicked, when everybody else is saying, all right, nobody else has a quarterback they can trade me. Everybody is kind of right at their limit. They've got exactly what they need, no more, no less. And you're the one person who has the ability to trade away a quarterback, and somebody just got desperate at quarterback. They've got this loaded lineup, at wide receiver, running back, and tight end. The one thing they're missing is quarterback. And they're looking around the rest of the league saying, who can trade me the quarterback that I need to finish off this roster? SFD can, QBX can, and I'm the only one who can afford to do it. So guess what? Guess what that does to the price? just sign a check and hand it to me. I'm not even telling you how much it costs. It's just a blank check. So yeah, we really kind of rely on that. The value, the way it drives the quarterback market. Man, there's just so many reasons to do it. But yeah, to me, at the very least, you've got to make sure that you can, so that you don't have to pay those prices, by the way, so that you don't have to try and trade for a quarterback without giving one up. You've got to make sure that you've got enough depth to keep quarterbacks in your lineup. And, kind of at the bare minimum, like I said, it feels like you probably have to handcuff your top guys. So, like I said, if you're going to do that, if you're going to handcuff, if you're going to handcuff Pat Mahomes and Dak Prescott, like, why not just instead a few rounds earlier add a couple more starting quarterbacks instead of those handcuffs. I don't know. Memo asks, Cam Newton worth having him on rosters? No, probably not. He just could not stay on the field for the Panthers, and it's not because he wasn't healthy either. He was just bad. It was just gross. They're gonna try and upgrade, and I just don't see another starting job for Cam Newton. I mean, I think the one thing that could make some sense for Cam Newton would be like a bridge quarterback situation, maybe to, like Malik Willis. To me, it always makes the most sense to have, two similar quarterbacks. Like if you're going to draft a rookie quarterback, it makes sense for Baltimore to have Tyler Huntley behind Lamar Jackson. We hate to see it. We would love to have Tyler Huntley starting somewhere, but for them, it makes sense, so that you have that continuity. If you lose Lamar Jackson, you're still running the exact same offense, with Tyler Huntley. He's just kind of Lamar Jackson light. So, it makes sense. And so Cam Newton, I think makes sense as kind of a bridge quarterback to another mobile run first type of quarterback, like a Malik Willis. I wouldn't gamble on that happening. NFL teams rarely do what I think makes sense. Almost never. So yeah, I wouldn't bank on that. I would just kind of say, yeah, Cam Newton most likely is not going to find a role. And even if he does, it's not going to be one that makes a whole lot of sense or, really does anything for us for fantasy purposes. Caleb asks, Deshaun Watson, where do you value him? Yeah, that's a great question. That's been kind of a tough one. I had kept him up in the upper tiers going into the 2021 season and finally just had to bump him down. Right now I've got him I actually have him one spot behind Russell Wilson. I've got him in the same tier as DeAndre Swift, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, I'm still valuing him as a top dynasty SuperFlex asset. I've got him in the tier above Devontae Adams and CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. So I think I'm probably higher on him than most people, most rankers for sure. And the whole thing is, we're just kind of trying to strike this balance right now with Deshaun Watson between, like baking in the risk, because there is risk there. We just saw it. He missed an entire season. It could happen again. He could miss all of 2022. I don't think he's just out forever, but he can miss another season. So we're trying to weigh that risk with the idea that, I mean, if he gets traded and, there isn't any missed time, and even if there is a suspension to serve, it's still, and kind of regardless of the length of the suspension, this is still dynasty. And you're still getting a good young quarterback who, before all of this came up, he was right there with Pat Mahomes in terms of production, sustainable, consistent production. And, so if we know he's going to be on the field and we know where he's going to be on the field, we have to bump him all the way up, right? We've got to put him in that conversation with Justin Herbert and Josh Allen and Kyler Murray. To me, he's probably ahead of those guys. He probably goes right back to quarterback 2 overall for me, if we know that he's going to be on the field. So we're trying to strike that balance. And to me, that balance puts him, somewhere in the late second, early third round of a startup. For a lot of people, it's going to be a little bit lower than that, more like a third or fourth round pick in a startup. But we're getting closer. We're finding that middle ground, and Yeah, I think that yeah, we're not super far off with him right at the moment. Vince Evans asks, is Sam Darnold worth a late pick? Yeah, probably. Because like there's still a chance for Sam Darnold to be the starting quarterback for Carolina. I I wouldn't bet on it unless you gave me pretty good odds, but I think that they recognize that they need a massive upgrade, and I think they probably recognize that they've got a competitive roster otherwise, other than the quarterback position. And anytime we see that, Denver is another example of that to me. Pittsburgh is going to be an example of that to me. Tampa Bay is going to be an example of that to me. These are all ready-made rosters. These are competitive rosters that are just missing the quarterback. And anytime we see that, we really kind of have to assume that they're going to be aggressive in finding that quarterback. So, yeah, the most likely scenario is Sam Darnold is not going to be their guy. There are kind of too many options available. But man, for a late pick, you could certainly do worse than, take a shot on somebody who could be a starter, probably won't, but could be. And just make him your first cut. If you put him on the end of your bench and say, if the news cycle at any point goes negative, he's gone. It's I think it's very little risk there. Yeah, let me get back to Nathaniel Bro. Some of the stuff he was asking me. How many years of starter stability do you place on Derek Carr and Ryan Tannehill? I think Tannehill still has several years. I think he's a multi-year starter from going forward. Dealing with injuries, major injuries to major offensive weapons, Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, Julio Jones. He still got them to the number one overall seed in the AFC. So it was also a little bit of a down year for the Chiefs in the win column. So, and it didn't amount to anything. It's a first round bye, second round exit. But, just the fact that he has them in that conversation, that he has them that competitive, even when the situation, the conditions aren't perfect. I think that deserves some loyalty. I think that probably gets him some loyalty. So, yeah, I would plan on Ryan Tannehill for the next, 2-3 years. Derek Carr is a little bit tougher. I don't think, for one thing, you have to consider the fact that he's in a very tough division. He has to find a way to beat Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert every single year. To be competitive in that division, that's what it's going to take. You have to beat those guys at least once each. And, I don't think that, I think that they're going to come, sooner rather than later, they're going to come around to the realization that Derek Carr doesn't keep you competitive in that division, much less in the conference. If he's basically, and this is not a way NFL teams necessarily look at it. They should, but they don't. They should really kind of be thinking in terms of, is a Super Bowl championship in his range of outcomes if we're not able to give him the absolute perfect roster to work with? If we're not able to give him an all-time defense, and we're not going to give him, a running game that can just kind of take over late in the game, the offensive line to protect him, things like that. If we're not able to put all of that together, is he still going to drag us to some wins enough to, to where a Super Bowl championship is a win in the Super Bowl is within our range of outcomes? And NFL teams really should be kind of doing that type of audit at the quarterback position. They don't, but they should. And I think that if the Raiders did that, they would come to the realization very fast that that's not a guy who's ever going to win you a championship. I do think Josh McDaniels is kind of that type of pragmatic type of evaluator. So, I'm kind of thinking Derek Carr probably has one more season to show that he is that type of guy. And the problem is he's not. So, yeah, give me one more season. I think that's kind of the best you're going to get from Derek Carr. Buy, sell, hold on Lamar Jackson. He's still in the top tiers, so I think he's probably a hold right at the moment. But as we talked about earlier, there's definitely a scenario where you take advantage of the of the trade value and go ahead and sell him. But that's to tier down. So in terms of are we actively trying to get away from him? I don't see any reason to. I think he's just fine. He doesn't have the career expectancy that a lot of quarterbacks would have for me, but in the meantime, he's one of the most dynamic playmakers with the ball in his hands in the entire league. So, yeah, I would hang on. Let's see. Jason Astorita asked, what, if any, are the differences in approach for you in these two roster formats, both PPR, when building and drafting? So the first one is we're only starting one at each position, essentially: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, one of each. And then we've got a super flex and 5 flex spots. The other one, we're starting 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and then we only have 2 flex spots in a super flex. So, kind of what's the difference in building between those two? And to me, anytime you have the opportunity, the lighter you can go at wide receiver, the better. The more flex spots you have, the better, because like you can get a little bit of wide receiver depth, but you can get away with having just 3 wide receivers on roster and loading up on running backs, loading up on tight ends with the premium, if you have a tight end premium. If you don't, focus on running backs. But you've got those wide receivers to kind of fall back on for flex spots. But ideally, the way you give your lineup the most upside is with a quarterback at super flex at all times, and running backs and then tight ends with premiums at the flex spots. So that's the big difference for me. I mean, in that start 3 wide receiver league, you have to take, you've got to have the 3 starting wide receivers, and then you've got to have a little bit of depth for bye weeks and for, in case of injury. So all of a sudden you're looking at more like 6 wide receivers on roster, where in the other one where you're only starting 1, you can kind of get away with 2 or 3 wide receivers on roster and free up all that roster space for running backs. So yeah, that's the difference to me. That's the difference in how I build them. The bottom line, I guess, like the easy answer here is, at wide receiver, I want 1 for each starting wide receiver spot. I'm not even considering them for flex spots when I'm building the roster. I want 1 wide receiver for each starting wide receiver spot. And then I want 1 backup. And maybe another guy who's, like a rookie that I hide on taxi squad or something like that. That's really all I want. And, if you only have to start 1 wide receiver, you can add a 3rd just to have a little bit of extra, an extra flex option. But I'm trying to keep it as lean as I possibly can. I want, so like I said, I want 1 wide receiver for each starting spot and 1 backup for each of those guys, and that's it. And, free up the rest of that roster space for running backs. So I guess that's kind of the easy answer to that one. That is, I believe, all we got on Twitter. I think that's all we got here in the chat. But thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for joining me. Another successful SuperFlex Super Friday, if I do say so myself. Certainly a lot of fun. And look forward to doing it here again in a couple weeks. And yeah, until then, stay sexy and super flexy.